Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. In a recent national survey on job happiness, being a freelancer has been named the most satisfying profession in China. Government officials had topped the list for several years, but now bureaucratic red tape has been cut and political shackles have been broken in a lifestyle choice that defies tradition. Aided by social media and digital technology, does this reflect a new reality, or is it instead an attempt to escape reality? What are the attractions and the pitfalls and what can we infer about globalization and the traditional work of society from those currently wrestling with restraints? To discuss these issues and more, I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Wang Huiyao, founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization, and Mr. Robert Parkinson, founder of China Recruitment Consultancy, RMG Selection. But before we begin our discussion, let's take a quick look at this.
What's the happiest career choice in China? Well, according to a survey conducted by Insight China magazine and Tsinghua University Media Survey Lab, the answer is surprisingly being a freelancer, an occupation with the potential for considerable income and controllable free time. The survey shows that 52.5% of the respondents regard wealth and happiness as not necessarily related. 35.1% of them believe that money can bring happiness, and only 12.4% of respondents agree that they would be happier with less money. Even so, income is still the most important factor for career satisfaction. The expression of personal ability and the room for career development are also key factors, followed by interpersonal relationships in the workplace, personal interests, welfare, social prestige from work, respect from superiors, position, and the status of the employer. Among the other top three choices of happiest career, government official had topped the list for several years, and teacher is also a constant. But for the first time, civil servant dropped out of the top three. The complete list of the top 10 most satisfying professions in China is as follows. Number 10, entrepreneur. Number 9, actor or actress. 8, fitness trainer. 7, private entrepreneur. 6, tour guide. 5, civil servant. 4, artist. 3, teacher. 2, government official. And number 1, freelancer.
Welcome to Dialogue. The word freelancing comes across as a pretty novel idea in the Chinese society. In the West, I don't think so. Are you surprised that the people start to talk more about the implications of having a freelancing job, Robert?
I have to say, in China I am. I mean, it's very interesting what you say, the number of people in freelance occupations in China. We surveyed this a few years ago. Is a tiny percentage, it's a fraction of 1%, whereas if you look at the United States, it is 33%.
33%,
right?
That's a hefty percentage.
And in Europe, 25%, and Forbes predict that by 2020, half of the global working population will be freelance workers.
Is that necessarily a normal practice and a phenomenon in a pretty developed society in the West? For example, where you have a sizable army of the middle class. I mean, Henry, you may have an idea about whether this is inevitably and necessarily an important phenomenon in an olive-shaped society where you have a sizable middle class.
Yeah. I think is what Robert mentioned is true, is that in developed society and in well-developed economy, that you have a lot of freedom and a lot of leisure to be a freelancer, a lot of savings, a lot of social welfare system that all have connectivity with this kind of phenomena. But I think China now starting to get into that stage now, and as urbanization is growing very rapidly, and we have a lot of graduates every year, 8 million, 7 to 8 million every year, and also we have a lot of people return overseas. Like this year, we have a record number of returnees, about almost 500,000 come back.
Despite the hazardous fog that descends on capital cities here?
Yes, despite PM 2.5 and all those things. But I think you mentioned very well at the beginning of this program that digital revolution and technology that enable this freelance become even more popular, because now people can highly concentrated in homes or maybe leisure time, rather than every morning to jam on the traffic and then produce the low quality.
Gentlemen, with the amazing changes in our lifestyles today in the present day China, do you think when we ask questions like index of happiness, freelancers will inevitably become a job of choice or a very happy choice?
Well, I think the point that I would make is that if there are jobs available for freelancers, it's governed by a demand for them. So, for example, to compare with the West again, banks, for example, who are upgrading their IT infrastructure may hire a lot of freelancers for a short period of time. I think in China it isn't such, the market is not so familiar with having a freelance setup yet. And I think the other point I would make is that freelancers, the term in China I think is more broad, and I think it includes a whole host of different occupations, including freelance professionals, including youngsters who
I'm
want
sorry,
to work
Robert,
in...
you didn't answer my question directly, because I'm asking
Yeah.
whether to be a freelancer means you have a lot more happiness.
I think that you certainly can't link it. I think, if you ask yourself the question, does more flexibility bring more happiness? Well, perhaps, but if you've got, there are needs, there are human needs that come before flexibility, i.e. money. So if you have the wealth, and I think a lot of people in China now do, if you have the means to become a more flexible worker, a freelance worker, for sure it will
That's of
probably
course
make
a very
you
interesting
happier.
perspective from Robert, who is of course in the foreign and an expert in Beijing. I don't know how long you have stayed in this host country of China, but Henry, those who did have a rich knowledge about China may have developed a more comprehensive picture about implications of happiness when it comes to the choice of freelancing. For example, a lot more Chinese used to work for the state-owned enterprises. They have the fixed office hours, and their private freedom and liberty could not be guaranteed. To say nothing of the unique political institutions, which are very different from Western civilization. In this broad context, when you take a second look at the so-called index of happiness regarding freelancers, so what do you have to say to our viewers here?
Well, I personally, I think that freelance does increase the happiness. First of all, to be a freelance means you have certain specialty or knowledge or expertise that you are needed in society. So the demand for freelance is strong. Like our think tank, we need a photographer come in to take photos. We need people to come to do a design for us. We don't need a full-time people, but we need a freelance. And also the internet has put the availability unprecedentedly high, because in the old days, if you're going to sell your freelance skill, you really have no vehicles. Now you have so many apps, so many internet scheme you can and do that now. And but finally, I want to say that is also that now the media is also under a lot of changes now. Traditional media is coming down, and the new media is thriving, and new media really have a strong demand for freelance. So plus the globalization as well. I mean, there's a lot of seagull travelers back and forth, not only freelance in China but also freelance in other countries. So you can see the globalized environment has been changed, and also domestic environment has changed, and talent is also more available now.
Well, your answer delivers many messages about the implications of a freelancer. But Robert, what's your take?
Well, I think that Henry makes a very interesting point, because if you look at the online market now in freelance transactions, for example, there's a website called freelancer.com where IT professionals and others can sell their services. That's now $1 billion business. But to come back to your point, and by the way, I've been in China for 11 years, so I don't know so much about it, but some knowledge. I fundamentally believe that money and what you earn and how you live your life doesn't necessarily buy happiness. I think that's much deeper. And for my profession as a executive search consultant, one of the observations I would make is people themselves very often don't actually know what will make them happy. And that's partly why we exist.
Well, I think the freedom, I mean, the freelance offers some degree of freedom. That is very valuable. As you said, if your 9 to 5 is
but
fixed.
freedom got to be protected by social security programs. Do you think China is ready to offer those freelancers with sound social security programs?
Well, I think if you look at the new labour law brought in 2013, that then restricted entrenched the rights of part-time temporary workers and meant they had to have social security and be well looked after.
What do you think?
Well, I think that you're right. I mean, the social protection system is not totally in place for the freelance this phenomenon. But in China, a lot of things are flexible. There's a lot of HR companies providing that service. You can have the social security, have your payroll belong to somebody, but you also do a lot of freedom in your other capacity as well. So even more so, there's a lot of freelance was in the name of a company. So it's one person company is very popular also. That's why now there's no, particularly recently, the current government is simplified the registration of business. So everybody can start a business now without, you don't need a address, you don't need an office, you don't need a registered capital.
Exactly.
So that
Premier
becomes
Li Keqiang says over and over that he should encourage the market forces to play a decisive role in reallocating resources. Does that imply the message, the serious message that more people will become self-employed?
That's actually contribute a significant rise, and also the contribution of a large insurge of this freelance, increase. I think the current government policy is encourage everybody, whether you have a job or not, be useful.
I think I agree. I think it possibly does, but I think another point on this whole issue is. There's almost an implication through the question that people don't want to go to work. And we forget sometimes that going to work is a social experience, and it can be very good for us if we work in the right place. It's important to interact with colleagues. Being at home or being in some entrepreneur bar or by yourself is not necessarily the dream that some people think it will be.
Well, I have a different opinion on that. I think freelance doesn't mean you don't go to attach people, go in touch with the people. You may instead of working for one company, you can work for 10 companies and interact with 10 times more people. And maybe
it doesn't mean you have to stay at home. You have to be more flexible. You enjoy more of the mobility in the society at large.
Right, but I think the point I would make is that we're not at the moment using freelancer as a really defined term, and it's a term that means a lot of different things at the moment. Whereas in, for example, Amsterdam or London, it specifically means contractors, people who are employed on a contract basis.
But is Edward Snowden a contractor in this sense? It's a very dangerous profession, isn't it?
Indeed.
Freelancing has a lot to do with independence, innovation, autonomy, and freedom. We've been discussing whether such ideas like independence could be protected very well in society which is undergoing profound transformation here in China. We are talking about social security program. We are talking about different laws that may be used to protect the individual liberty. This is a kind of a liberty, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree. And nobody's totally free. You have to connect it with a larger environment. As I mentioned, the society seems now, and also the government, relaxed the barrier, the threshold to be a freelancer now. But in old days, it's very difficult. You cannot, as you have to attach to somebody. In old days, you have to attach somebody to get a house to be assigned to, and then you have to really get documents to take an airplane. If you don't have an organization, you don't even able to. But now, that has changed. So I think there's so many HR companies, headhunting companies, talent companies providing that kind of attachment and service. Moreover, I think that's really driving the force is this digital revolution, this online availability, and also easy to sell from dot-com economy and become a personalized economy. That make freelance more possible and available.
Thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Harry Wang Huiyao and Robert. We are discussing the emerging profession of freelancers in China, which is moving ahead in its modernization drive while undergoing profound transformation of the economy and society at large. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. Robert, go ahead with your analysis about
So I think one of the points I wanted to make was essentially if we really drill down into what is driving this is the fact that the middle classes in China now have vast wealth compared to, say, 30 years ago. So people talk about having a rest, to talk about relaxing, and there's a general attitude towards having a more casual approach to work. My point simply would be that this will not last. You know, a fast period of growth, as we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years, 15% doesn't last, 7.5% won't last. And indeed, the money that people have made on property, which has largely driven a lot of people's wealth, that's not going to last forever. So I think people, particularly young people, Generation Y, the so-called millennials, people born in the 80s and 90s, who might have it very easy now, might well be in a different position in 20 years' time, and they need to plan for this.
And what do you think of this prospect of having more freelancers as China entered into the society of service industry, which currently accounts for more than 50% of our GDP, and instead of being confined to the assembly lines of a labor-intensive manufacturing industry like what we had in the first 3 or 2 decades after China's opening up, the service industry means automatically that more will be involved in freelancing profession.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, 10 years ago, the service sector counted about 30% of China's GDP. Now it's over 50, you know, almost getting to 60 now. So that's a big change. And then, you know, developing economy, always 80, you know, even 90%. So I think that, you know, getting into the service society, and also particularly with all those technology available, and also as Robert mentioned, the mentality of the young people now, the freedom, that's the buzzword, you know, because that generates a lot of happiness. And then that's really, if I can, you know, work 5 hours, making the same as I work 8 hours, why not 5 hours? Yeah. You know, that's the tendency, and human nature is like that. So I think that the current technology, the environment, and also the demand from the society on freelance, and also the more acceptable norm of this freelance. Because in the old days, probably if you don't have a job, if you don't have an organization in China, people look down upon you as you are, you know, as some kind of a...
Let me raise one follow-up question about your alleged contempt upon those who don't have a regular job.
Old days.
Now, yeah, in old days, of course, that's changing very quickly. But Robert and Henry, these days the girls are pretty practical, particularly for those who work and live in the first-tier cities. They need to have a boyfriend or a spouse who have the property and automobile. Now, if you say, look, I'm sorry, I'm just a freelancer, does that mean that the happiness of the marriage could be guaranteed?
Well, I think it largely depends what sort of freelance you are. If you're a freelance architect who charges $100,000 per project, probably the young ladies in the first-tier cities will be pretty keen on you. It would be my perspective. I do understand, however, that you know, there is pressure on young men in particular in China to get married and buy a car and a house and all this sort of stuff. But inevitably, history tells us that those sorts of pressures will even off. That's my view on that.
I think the current mass innovation and also encouraged by the society, even by the government, entrepreneurship, they always start from one person. Actually, a lot of startups start up with freelance. So if you're really you know, valuable, if you're really skillful in one profession, and then you start to sell your personal service, and then you sell your team, and then you sell your company. So I think that's kind of movement in China. It's just in the starting stage now.
Right. I think Henry makes an excellent point there, and actually there are companies in Silicon Valley in the US where the only person who's a permanent employee is the CEO, and the entire company is made up of freelancers or contract workers. So I think this will be a trend. If you also look at the global trend, it is towards freelance working because companies want flexibility. I think it's important to bring it back to business rather than happiness.
I'm happy, Robert, put your finger on the idea of Silicon Valley. Having said this, now, do you think those who work in the incubator to run startup companies could also be called freelancers?
Well, I think probably start, you know, like those makers getting into an incubator space that you just have a desk there, and you don't have a secretary, you don't have a staff, but you don't have all the supporting staff. The supporting staff was provided by incubator. You know, you have a legal service, you have accounting service, you have a registration services. So you come in. So that's precisely the point that we see a surge of the freelance in China. It's a lot of them are makers themselves.
Right, and I think if you look at China, China has now become an economy of innovation. You've just got to look at aerospace, clean technology, information technology. There's so much here, and for that you do need flexible workers. You need that freelance workforce, absolutely.
You guys have been talking about the spirit of innovation as an important part of urbanization. Yet another important growth point from the perspective of Premier Li Keqiang to facilitate the modernization. What do you think the innovation with regard to freelancer?
I think that's probably in a China society that's really maybe it's a quick way to be more innovative in a country like size in China. For example, in the old days, even you want to be innovative, you lack tools. Now everybody's have a little computer, a mobile, those
smartphones.
Smartphones on hand. It's basically they can play, so that's actually greatly stimulating the personal potentials to be a freelance or to provide what kind of service they can provide, and that really helps China going by leaps and bounds. But on the other hand, I think this innovation economy is that we have to really become not only imitating but also innovating in the end, because only by true innovation then you can really be the leaders. Of course, you can also be an imitator after that. But whether innovative or imitating, but I think still you need a lot of freelance to do that. So the elements of the society, everybody is a catalyst.
By the way, you are an expert about immigration and visa policy in China. Do you think with the emergence of freelancing as a serious profession in China, more and more part-timers and freelancers from the other side of the Pacific Ocean or from European countries will converge in first-tier and second-tier cities seeking jobs here in big Chinese
absolutely
market?
I mean, China has starting to relax the environment because China is aging, labor cost is rising, so we are now starting to build up China immigration system for the global immigrants. And so first we're actually attracting the talents from outside. I think by losing the multiple entry visa, 10 years, a green card, or even work permits in China, like 72-hour visa free, now it's 144 hours free, visa free. That's the kind of environment we can attract a lot of people to come in, to provide one week service, and they don't have to stay here all the time.
What I would say, I think that's a very good point, but I think we're focusing here on very high-end freelancers. And I think if you look at junior developers, if you look at translators, if you look at really anything that can be done remotely, China is under some threat by countries like the Philippines and India, where software development can be outsourced quickly and cheaply. There's widespread knowledge of the English language. So these companies, freelancing is not just happening in China.
One angle I'm thinking now is that when we talk about freelance, we always talk about people that don't have a job and just does the freelance. Actually, we found a new tendency now is also encouraged by some local governments that, for example, if you're a hospital doctor, you have a full-time job, but you're also doing freelance in the weekend. Right? I mean, you are teaching in the day
You're
weekdays.
talking about moonlighting,
yeah,
a second job.
That's right, but sometimes there's not a clean line between moonlighting and freelance. But that's a lot. That's also on the increased side as well.
Absolutely.
You need to have both sunshine and moonlighting.
Look at the proliferation of people that open so-called WeZin or WeChat stores. There's a lot of people doing this stuff like that, even full time.
Even on Alibaba, I mean, all
Right.
those people probably freelance too. I mean, how do you define that? They're not really working hours, but then they have the technology enable them to choose the flexible hours to work, and the internet is working full time rather than people working full time. Yeah.
We need to have a redefinition about freelancing with the rise of the internet and particularly e-commerce. Do you think Alibaba, for example, has set a very good example in the service industry, creating more jobs for part-timers and freelancers, Robert?
Yeah, I think Jack Ma's company is a superb example of what can be done with some innovation and how quickly it can be done. What I don't think is that it's not going to completely change the economy overnight. And I would still go back to the original statistic I mentioned that less than 1%. According to our survey of the country, is employed, on a traditionally freelance basis, whereas it's huge in more developed parts of the world.
Well, gentlemen, independence, self-reliance, autonomy, these can be good qualities for people to have and to pursue. But do you have a downside? I mean, do they have a downside, negative aspects concerning freelancing as a new and emerging profession, Henry?
Well, I think they do. Is that if some people starting very old, very late at their career, so if they do not have a safety nest being built already, and if they do not have enough savings, so if they try a few years of freelance and it doesn't work out, then you have a large blank in your resume, and then it's difficult to find getting back in the job market, and then if you don't have enough social benefit pension to protect you, then could be a problem. Of course, for the young people, the thing is that we see the internet helps young people to become freelance at a much early age of their life. So if they didn't work out, they can always come back again to the labor market or to the professional market to restart them again. So that's probably the danger I see for the age people.
Robert, what do you think of the vulnerabilities?
I think that the vulnerabilities are more to do with social skills, social interaction. I think that I observe some very wealthy people, who've made money on the property markets, who give their kids, money to go and open shops or things which often close very quickly. One point I would like to just mention, which we haven't touched on yet, which I think is a real advantage of freelance working, is for women. So women who have children, I think that's an excellent way to combine bringing up your children at home yourself rather than outsourcing that, but still maintaining a relationship with the working world.
Now, gentlemen, don't you think what we call modernization drive is actually a process of decentralization? And with the choice of freelancing as yet another serious profession, don't you think the government at different levels will run the risk of having more defiance and more even anarchical spirit from the younger generation? Don't forget, we have long enjoyed a tradition of enjoying powerful central government. If we have more of such freelancers who say, I don't give a damn about the central authorities, then that could be a big, serious political problem.
Well, that's
and
you can't eat the cake and have it at the same time. But if you want an innovative economy, if you really want to be the leading country in the next few decades, you have to train the labor force to be more innovative. You have to afford this kind of a freedom spirit.
Perhaps the best answer.
Yeah.
Perhaps the best answer is the rule of law.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
sure.
very much for being part of this dialogue on a very interesting and stimulating topic about freelancing as an emerging profession in a society that is going through very profound transformation at this moment. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.